I'm Bob, and I'm an addict.
Hi, Bob.
Hi,
So it tells me a lot about the audience.
We don't have a cure, and we don't want
Almost everyone responded. That tells me a lot.
I can put anything.
Jump right in. I'm talking about HPIL today. I created none of what I'm going to be talking to you about today. I have found things and learned things and reacquainted myself with things, and I'm sharing to give back maybe a little bit of the pleasure I got out of some of this stuff. I in no way created any of this stuff. I'm going to give credit where credit's due later. As Richard said, I was heavily involved in PPC in the early 80s when I was in Southern California, and I had the incredible luck and luxury of being in the heart of going to the meetings and stuffing parties and all that to be part of it. But I stepped away. I spent a number of years at Sharp doing competitive, not really, handhelds. But the 71, as I was stepping out of the HP world, was my love affair. I loved that machine. Bought HPIL, almost everything I can afford, and a few I couldn't afford. And spent a bunch of time with that. One of the things that stepped me, actually, oddly enough, away from it was I was working with a guy in HP support. They had the PC, the ISA bus interface thing for HPIL, so you could talk to a PC, and they were struggling to make a vanilla printer work on HPIL. So I talked with them, the guy sent me some tech documents, and I started writing some assembler stuff for PC to make the ThinkJet printer work in various modes and sending it back to HP, and that pushed me into the PC, and I kind of didn't look back for a long time. I mean, I still bought them and had them, but didn't really geek all that much with them. So I kind of summarized that as I sort of lovingly ignored HPIL until the conference a year ago. And I had dabbled on the boards and stuff and gone in and seen JF's Pillbox, but saw it from the way he described it as very much a hands-on hardware guy kind of thing. And I'm a mechanical engineer, so I can break large physical things, but electrical things is harder for me to break. So I kind of didn't do much. I talked to several people at HHC last year, and several people said, oh, it's cool, it works. Just, just get it and just do it. And I kind of put that on the list of something to do. And Joe got one shortly after the conference, and I've been talking with him, and he kind of echoed, yeah, it just works, it just does it. So what is it? I'll get to in a moment, but the point is that where I've come in the last year was spurred by comments at this exact gathering, and so I'm just trying to kind of take my excitement level of it and amp it back to you guys. The HPIL is not a 71B only thing, as you would probably conclude from my presentation, because I have a very strong bias. I'm learning 75 now, and to most of you know 75 was not so popular because of pricing and other things, but they're actually readily available on eBay and other places now. And I'm relearning the 41 stuff, and it's astounding to me how little of the 41 stuff I retain. I actually read the HPIL manual for the 41 on the plane out here and learned a few things that I have, and my slides aren't quite right. Quick question, how many people in the audience have done HPIL stuff over the years? Okay, so then of those people, like, how many did 41 stuff? How many did 71 stuff? How many did 75 stuff? Okay, so that's about right. I would say if you have a question about what I'm talking about, just raise your hand in the middle. If it's related to, if I'm being vague or unclear or going off on a tangent or something, just jump in. And it's the stuff I'm going to show is not all that interesting to see per se visually, but if there's interest, I can do it on the side, or maybe Sunday there's some time. So I'll ask again at the end if that's relevant to do. What I'm going to go through, I'm going to review HPIL, just to get us back into sync, returns and all that. What is, I think it's pronounced LIF, but I call it LIF. I don't actually know what the right way to pronounce it is, and therein lies the story. The Pillbox itself, which is this device, and if you're not familiar with it, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about what it is. The client of Windows software, some virtual extensions of HPIL and other virtual extensions to the virtual network that it does, and some real-world examples of stuff, and then some resources, and I got a lot of links in the charts to places to go find this stuff. and some appropriate credits where people have
It's
done
all
things.
on the thumb drive.
Yep, yep. So the HPIL HP interface loop, there's a serial interface with a loop configuration where the devices are literally, oops, wrong hand, literally daisy chained from the controller to a device, and the cable goes to the next device, to the device, and then back. Each device has two plugs on it, an in and an out, and that's how they're labeled. On the loop, there are many devices, but there is only one active controller at a time. The controller can be passed from one device to another, the role of controller, but at any given moment, you're limited to one controller. But that doesn't mean there's only one device talking. There's the actual terms in HPIL is a talker and a listener, but the controller dictates who is talking and who is listening. So the controller may well say, you're the talker, and you are the listener, so go ahead and start talking, and that device can then start sending stuff, and those people can consume it. There's lots of ways to address a device. You can say the second HP 225B, or you can say the second printer, or you can say the device that is currently the active printer. So it's very flexible in terms of addressing, which is good in terms of ad hoc configurations and things like that. And as I said, the devices can talk to each other. That doesn't make them controllers, and it doesn't mean that they have to be intelligent, like CPU kind of devices. It could be just a DAC sending data to a printer, or all kinds of other things. A controller is a terminal-like device, a 41, a 71, a 75, so the most common ones to this crowd. The 110, I just recently got one of those. Those are cheaply available. They're very interesting.
Where'd you get it?
Dave Fredrickson. But they're available on eBay. $50 is kind of the going price these days for, amazingly enough, it's kind of the, if you think about how much computing of HP stuff per dollar, it's probably the max thing there. They're pretty cool. They don't seem to be commanding a high price for whatever, excuse me.
Have you run into the controllers that will manage 3 IL loops yet?
I have a dual IL adapter for my 71. I haven't run into a triple one yet.
Yeah.
But in my sort of spelunking to get information for this presentation, I discovered that there are many more esoteric devices out there than were in the common literature. A lot of special purpose things. I alluded to this. This is a PC card that went in an old world ISA slot for DOS. And I have no experience at all with HP 80 series and the 150 series desktops. There were rumors that some of the 9000 series, the 200 and 300, also had HPIL capabilities, but I couldn't find any product numbers to that effect. Does anybody know if that's true or false? No? I couldn't.
9000 mini computer?
No, like the 200 and 300 series.
Oh, those.
Yeah. The workstations.
I've got those, but I've never seen an HPIL.
Yeah, I've read comments that it can do it, but I couldn't find any products, so it may have been a one-off or something, because they made, HP made products for embedded, so build your own HPIL thing. The most common, the printers, everyone remembers the 41, this one, which was the 41 plug-in, and this is basically just an IL version of that. The ThinkJet printer, which was HP's first inkjet printer.
I have lots of those.
I have more of them than I wish. Though in my period away, short story, I forgot, in my period of away, when I was moving from one house to another, I had many HPIL things. I had a 9114B and a ThinkJet, and it was just like, oh, this stuff is never going to be useful again. Out it goes. So don't make that mistake if you can, because it costs time and money and angst to replace them. Mass storage, the tape drive that we all have played with at one point or another, probably. An interesting thing, oh, by the way, this uses the Filbert protocol, which presumes a tape. It can apply to different kinds of physical devices, but it's kind of a tape-oriented device, and it's in that the protocol, the way it works at a lower level, is very much get the index, go get the file, rather than random access. This is an interesting thing I discovered recently. I was convinced, as many people are, that tapes from back then are all no good because you put it in the tape drive and you can't read it. And it turns out that everyone that I and Dave and several other people have encountered, actually the tapes are fine. The only thing that's wrong is there's a small felt pad behind the tape that holds the tape up against the magnetic head. The glue holding the pad to the retaining clip has come loose, and you can't see it because it looks fine, but what happens is the tape is not being held. So you can literally pry the little cassettes apart. You don't have to cut them or anything, they just pop apart. You take a little metal clip and take a little piece of felt, like from a hobby shop, and glue it on, and put it all back together, and 100% of the tapes, which is about, I don't know, maybe 18, I think, at this point that I've tried, all work perfectly fine. So, some of the tapes that apparently I throw away, and probably a lot of others of you have either thrown away or concluded are no good, are all probably very good. This problem applies, by the way, to brand new ones still sealed in the package. It's just the glue that was used. So basically, if you try them and they don't work, just redo that.
Yeah, I've got cassettes, tapes too.
Also, the 9114B, and there was a 9114 and an A, and Joseph has one up here if you don't recall it. Basically, a disk drive for a 720K format disk. Uses the drive supports actually both what's called the SS80 protocol, which is for much larger things, including hard disks, but it also supports the Pillbox protocol. Most often today, when you're buying used ones or doing it, the most common mechanical problems, some have board failures and others, which Tony Doyle has diagrams, and you can do that. But the most often mechanical problem is just the eject mechanism is stuck, just because it's dirty and it's glumped up with grease and stuff, and it just seems like it doesn't work. But, you know, a few screws, it comes apart, it's just a mechanical cleaning job, just some cleaning and lubrication, and they're all working again. Yeah?
That's particular to the A model, not necessarily the B. They used a different disk drive. On the A model, what happened was you would you would put a disk in, leave it in there, later on come back, try to pop the disk, and it would tear one of the heads right off because it would not properly release the disk. But then the B fixed that problem. But it was the particular drive that they used for the A that was problematic.
I've heard that, thank you for clarifying, I didn't know what the mechanism was, but I've heard that the A's are worse at damaging. But basically, any device, any one of these, which are about 30 plus years old, if you find it somewhere, and you can find them cheap, open it up and clean it like almost any other thing, and you're going to find it probably works. Some other devices, just real quick. They had a DAC, 30-channel AC/DC, which you could actually program with a 41, and a lot of the material documents that came with it talk about how to do it, but it's really tedious with a 41 because you're at low-level HPIL. With the 71, came with had a data acquisition pack that sort of bundled all that into a series of programs to where you're really just using modular basic programs to build a suite of stuff. There was the multimeter, which I just recently got one of these, and that's fun to play with. I hope to never actually need any of these devices for the rest of my life. This is something I never heard of. I just recently saw they made a gas chromatograph for HPIL, which is a pretty, no idea how many they sold, but that's an impressive investment. I would have liked to talk to the guy that convinced management to make that. And then also you can use PC Slave. Jeff's Term 71 program is a cool little application that actually he still sells on EPROMs, where you use the 110 Portable Plus as a terminal for the 71 through HPIL, where it's a keyboard and the screen. So you can actually, most of us aren't like Joseph and can't type 30 words a minute on a 71 keyboard. At least my fingers are too fat. But I found I can type pretty well. Basically, it's a tiny little program, and it's just his clever knowledge of IL and escape sequences. Other devices, video output modems, serial ports, HPIB, SCSI, these things. So basically anything in the early 80s that could talk to HPIL. And so I wanted to, how much do I need to know to do this stuff? And I thought that this diagram we go through in low-level detail to understand, if you can describe everything here, then you're set. But the other perspective is really, if you can copy a file in DOS, you're covered too. So we'll skip that in terms of time. So what are the things I'm talking to? They're LIF or LIF. I don't know. Is there opinion in here? Does anyone have a definitive answer? Is it LIF?
It's LIF.
It is LIF, right? It is LIF. It's an HP cross-platform media format that predates DOS, but up until the mid-'80s, I want to say, basically every kind of computing platform HP made supported this media format. It's very, from our perspective looking at it today, it's crude and weird, like why the heck is it so non-standard? It's because it's pre-DOS, and so that's why it's not DOS and Windows and Mac-like in that sense. Every file has a file name, but there is no .text or .doc or anything. The things like file attributes of what kind of application it is and how the data in it is used are in fields in the LIF format, the file type, which is, I think, 2 bytes, and the implementation bytes, which I think is 6 bytes. This article here, and I put a live link in it by, I'm blanking on his name. I'll get back to it. The definitive article, if you care even a little bit about this, go read or skim this article.
Would it be Mike Markoff?
No. It's on the forum. It's on the museum forum. It's dated 2000. It is, basically it starts with, okay, here's my problem. I have something in a LIF volume and I want it in DOS. How do I do that? But he sort of breaks down into every possible, this is the format of the file and this is the header. These are the tools you can use. So if it interests you, you don't have to know almost any of this stuff at all. But it's a very educational one. In fact, I read this at the beginning of my re-immersion into IL, and I understood maybe 30% of it. And I read it again at the end, and I understood maybe 70% of it. So you don't need to understand it all. So what is a LIF volume? Well, it's a thing for holding data. It's a file format. You know what, I skipped? I guess so it's a volume. It's an image format, either an actual tape or an actual disk or a file which represents them in the sense of, think of it like a zip file. It's a file that holds files that can be mounted into different kind of media. So how do I do that? Well, basically I want to copy a file. Somebody says, hey, I've got a cool file for my 71 or my 41. Do you want it? Well, how do you do that? Well, you can make a card and put it in the mail and so forth, but a simpler thing is you basically mount the volume with the Pillbox. We're going to talk about the software. You connect your controller. You just copy the file from your device to that volume. You close it, and now what you have is a DOS or Mac or whatever level file that you can then send to someone, and they're going to repeat the process. So just think of it as taking a file, putting it into a zip, sending the zip to someone else. They take it out of the zip and put it into the device, which is the kind of thing that we all do. Well, I think most of us do almost every day with one kind of file or another. Jackie?
Dan McDonald.
Yes, thank you very much. Dan McDonald did that. So one of my, early on in this exploration, one of my pet peeves is, well, it's still darn hard to get a DOS file into a LIF file. You can't just copy, you can't do it directly. But there are good reasons that it's difficult, and that's because there is no extension. There is no way to create these implementation bytes. There are tools that do this sort of thing. The HP DIR tool, which is part of the 9845 project, lets you do almost all of that. There are some gotchas, like zero length files, the media, the HP DIR program. Like if you have a directory, if one of your files is 0 length, it stops reading the directory at the 0 length file. There are also Linux tools that do it. But it's still not a direct extract the file. You have to know the file type and extract it, and then you're going to create the file type in a DOS level, to then convey to someone else. So you can do it, but ultimately I became convinced there are very good reasons why no one's had made this, because it seems like an obvious, well, why didn't somebody just do that? Because this is what we all want to do. So what is this thing? This is a Pillbox. Do you guys want to see it? You want to hand it around? Just don't yank on these. In about one page, you'll see why. It's a device for HPIL device to USB, which connects to any kind of PC client we have. Actively supported in Windows, supported, I think, under Parallels on Mac, and I've heard that there are other ways of doing it. There's also sort of Linux support, but it's like you got to write your own kernel and, the whole Linux thing. Jean-Francois Gagné, otherwise known as Jeff from JF, created this in 2009. Jeff has been very active in the community continuously, it seems, throughout. He was very involved in the JPC RUM, in the Paris chapter of PPC, and a whole bunch of other things, some of which I'm going to touch on. He told me that there are over 150 of them, and this goes back to early this year. And I'm hoping that the number's going to grow as a result of some of this kind of stuff. And not only has he done it and made them, he continues to support it. He had a big firmware update in May. He was doing some re-engineering inside and basically concluded, well, okay, this is field upgradable and you can do it. Joe, what kind of chip was it? An Arduino board?
I don't know.
I thought you had yours updated.
Yeah,
Or did Dave do it?
Dave sent me the little gadget you plug in and it flashes the chip, but I have no idea what it was.
Yeah, well, anyhow, I think it's an Arduino board, if I'm not mistaken.
Programmer.
Oh, no, it's the programmer for the 41.
Oh, yeah.
Anyhow, I'll get back to that. But the point is, he continues to maintain it. He's also said publicly, remember I talked earlier, there's the Filbert protocol and the SS80. He also has said publicly that it's his goal to update the firmware to support the SS80, which would allow volumes up to 10 megabytes, I think he said. Pardon me, you can buy it as a complete unit, or you can buy it as a kit, like right down to the board. These are the components. It's a pretty simple thing. Took about a week to get it from France. It was a long week in my life, but it took a week. You have to supply your own HPIL cable. It's not part of it, and that's because they're becoming harder to find. Not impossible.
I have cable.
Okay. So I'm stumping for Rich's new side business here.
No, I'll explain that tomorrow.
Okay. So basically you take one cable, you cut the cable, and the ends go here. Two of them connect, and this is the in, and two of them connect, and that's the out. But even if you're not too good with hardware stuff, it took me less than 5 minutes beginning to end, and it's worked perfectly since. So it's not a leap, it's pretty trivial. As I mentioned, you can upgrade the firmware. Excuse me, these are the items. So some of this information is from the perspective of a 71. So I connect my device to this thing, I plug it into my PC, and we're going to see the software. But what does this device provide? It provides two devices from a logical perspective. One is a mass storage device, and one is a printer. This is the device ID string for the mass storage device. In retrospect, JF has said that I really shouldn't have called it one because, you can have 2 and 3 and 4 devices of this type, and it's confusing because it's H drive 1, parentheses 2, and so forth. But anyhow, that's the device name. It uses the Filbert protocol. Excuse me, Filbert protocol, which was originally intended for the tapes, which is a 128K max, but nothing in the protocol limits the size. So it supports up to 616K and 640 entries. That said, the 41 only supports a very odd number, something like 147, or some very odd number of files on the media. That's a limitation of the controller, I guess. On a 71, it's addressed as the kind of logical device, and this is the second, third. Tape, mass mem, and H drive are all equivalent. So this is even though this is the name that it is, it responds to this, which is a class, and tape. So a lot of my examples, I use tape because it's just faster to type. Although that leads to a lot of confusion because people think we're talking about tape drives. Right.
And you can abbreviate any of those. So for, like, instead of H drive, you can just say HD.
I did not know.
Yeah,
So can I say TA?
I haven't tried that one.
We'll find out.
Yeah.
Okay, new assignment. Of course, when connected to a portable plus, a DOS device, it's not any of this kind of stuff. It just shows up as the D drive, or the E drive, or the F drive. So it becomes the next logical type of the, based on your platform. On a 41, you wouldn't see it this way. On a 41, you would address it either by its address itself, or by, I gotta think, how do you address, who knows? How do you address a mass memory device in 41 and HPIL? What is the logical name? I don't recall. Good, good, I'm not the only one. Okay. The other device class, or the other kind of virtual device that it provides is, it's a printer device. When he first created it, he was thinking in terms of a display because that's what it looks like. It looks like a display, but it actually has been recast as a printer for some reasons that I'll be able to illustrate with a demo. But basically, anything that you print, you know, to what would have been the virtual, the HPIL printer, the ThinkJet, or the script printer, or whatever, the printed output goes to the window, and I'll show you that in a moment. It only supports text. It doesn't support graphics or escape sequences or those sort of things. But the thing that you print to in this window supports copy-paste from Windows. So the idea is you print output, and then you can capture the output and do whatever you want on the platform you're on. This is what the client looks like. It's called ILPer for that reason. The original client was written by JF in VB, and the source is available. And I know I'm not going to get it right. Christoph Gisselink? Gisselink? Okay. I hate not being able to pronounce someone I'm giving credit to. He rewrote it. Christoph, you probably know as the EMU 48 and all the others. Both of these guys, hugely prolific, hugely generous, ingenious class sort of thing. That's why Christoph says, oh, it's easily extensible to know all kinds of things. And so my comment was, yeah, genius class folks, take note. It's easy for you, not the rest of us. Pardon me again. The areas here, this is the printer output window. So this is a scrollable buffer. Whatever you print comes into here and scrolls up the top. It's larger than anything I've tried. I don't know, maybe it just keeps grabbing memory after Windows runs out, but I did 3 64K dumps and it just takes it all. So it's a huge, there's no practical limit in my opinion. This is the IL scope window where you just put a checkbox here, and what you see dumped out here is the IL commands, the lower level IL commands. So if I do cat tape 1, that's not the IL command. There's actually a whole series of commands that go back. So this is a very simple way of learning. It's just a scope. It's like a packet sniffer where you can just look at the commands that are being generated by a user level command. But when it's on, the loop is very slow, very slow. But you're probably not, it's certainly fast enough to learn what's going on. You can also capture output from here. There's some configuration controls for connecting the virtual COM port from USB and some other settings here, and also for selecting the LIF volume, which we're going to talk about in a second. So if I'm running connected to a 41 or on a DOS machine, it's the same client, it looks the same, it acts the same. This is output from a 41, and this is a directory listing. So the client window on a window, the client application on a Windows machine is the same no matter what other devices you're talking to. Actually, a funny side story. JF discovered he forgot that the 110 supported filbert protocol, and one day he was playing around and he put a note on the forum saying, "Oh my God, it works on a 110. So now you can use the Pillbox on a 110." And I'm thinking, wow, how did he get that stuff to run on a 110? He's like, oh, you idiot, is a file storage thing. So anyhow, sorry, if you weren't part of that, sorry. Basically, those are the two devices that this one client provides. Should I pause there? Is it clear? This is providing, this is where you specify the file that you're going to pick, that you're now talking to. This is your output. So those are the two logical devices that this thing provides, that the ILPer client and the Pillbox provide. But there are other things that we may want to do in HPIL. So there are additional pieces of software written by these two guys. A virtual monitor, so that if you really want to have something more than, well, for example, on a 71, you can say display is the printer, and so that you can essentially capture a log of everything you're doing at the console in the output window. But that's awkward, and not all platforms support it. So one of the things Christoph did was made a monitor. So it's a whole 80-column monitor, and you can do color palettes and all that. He also made a more enhanced version of what is the integrated scope window, so that you can do real low-level, break it down, and get to low-level. Haven't played with this yet. It's coming myself, so I can't talk about this in detail. And also, ILPR provides one mass memory device and one printer device. But what if I want two? Simplest thing, copying files for, say, a calculator conference or something like that. How do you copy something from one media to another? Well, I can copy it from my LIF volume to RAM, and then swap volumes, and then copy it from RAM to that. But it would be easier if I had two of these. But you can't have two because there's just one USB port, right? So it's connecting. So what do you do? Here's sort of a, this is Christoph's extension. Here's sort of a block diagram where in my PC I'm running ILPR, and it's talking through the USB port to the Pillbox. And the Pillbox is connected to a physical chain of devices. There's just two shown here, and it just shows this. But these are the physical things. This might be 10 devices. It might be 20 devices. It might be one device. But this is sort of the serial interface. So this is call it the standalone single mode. He was frustrated by the same issues of, what if I want two? What do I do? So, being one of those genius class folks, he extended the ILPR client by adding a virtual network capability, virtual HPIL, on the PC, where the Pillbox client talks to ILPR, which talks to another instance of ILPR, which talks TCP/IP, oh, I'm sorry, all these are TCP/IP, through TCP/IP to another PC, maybe on the next desk, maybe in the next country. It's TCP/IP, it doesn't matter, to another instance of ILPR, to his scope program, or any of the virtual HPIL things. So basically now suddenly I have this one device connecting to all these physical devices. Now I have all these virtual devices as well, all talking through the luxury of having the TCP stack on all these platforms. So again, you have the physical world through the Pillbox to this new component called IL Pillbox. I think of it as a gateway, and I'll show you what it looks like. So instead of having the Pillbox talking to ILPR, in this enhanced, the Pillbox talks to a program called IL Pillbox, and I can't get into naming, I don't understand it all, but anyhow, that's what it is. And this is a gateway or a bridge, whatever you want to call it, into the sequence of all these other virtual devices. You don't have to have multiple PCs, it doesn't have to be complicated. So what does it look like? On my PC, I run this is Pillbox, IL Pillbox, and these are the two ILPRs. So on my PC, I run with two of these connected all the time, so I can copy data from one media format, one file, to another file without having to play games with closing and opening and redoing that. This is his monitor that's shown here, and this is the gateway. So following the logical diagram before, the Pillbox talks to here, and this talks TCP/IP to here, which talks TCP to here, which talks TCP to here, which talks TCP back to here, because it's a loop, right? It's using TCP/IP as a virtual HPIL connectivity between these things. So when I first looked at this, I said, that's cool, gotta have it. Oh my God, how am I gonna figure out how to do all this TCP stuff? Yeah, I do it for my job and all that, but as soon as play becomes work-like, I think we can all deal with that, right? So it seemed like it was going to be complicated, but actually it's incredibly easy. You probably can't make it out, but you have the slides. What this says here is this thing has 3 fields, well 4 in a sense. This one is the same as back on the IL per client. What COM port am I talking to the physical device, USB? And this has, what is the IP address of the next thing I'm going to talk to? What channel am I going to talk to? What TCP port am I going to talk to the next guy? And what is the channel or port that the next guy is going to talk to me? So basically here I just put in localhost because these are all on the same PC in this case. And I just put an out address. So this out address points to this in address. This out address points to this in address. This out address points to this in. This out to this in. So basically, I just go around and put these, 4 numbers in a loop. This points to here, points to here, points to here, points to here, and it works. And that's really pretty much. It's one of those things that it's a little bit like RPL and calculus. It seems complicated, and you get it, and then you realize, oh, is that all there is to it? Oh, okay. So basically, you don't have to know anything about TCP. You don't have to understand stacks and frames. You don't have to bring the OSI model into discussion. You just basically say, this guy talks to this guy, talks to this guy, talks to this guy. And the only thing you have to remember in that sense at that point is this client, in the sequence that I went through, this client is going to be tape 1, and this is going to be tape 2, or what have you, in your sequence, just the order. So I basically am going to configure, I'm going to have this open a file, and this open a file. And so then I can say if Namir sent me a file in Windows and says, here's the coolest 71 programs I've seen this month, and I want to make a copy, I just take his file, throw it on my Windows machine, point this to it, over here maybe open up a new file or another file, and then on my machine I just do copy, I'll have some examples, but I just do copy from this, think of it as, the 2 physical disks, you're just copying from disk 1 to disk 2. Using the exact same commands and the exact same syntax as you would on your platform of choice, 41, 75, whatever. But that's not all. So there are other things, I call it how to do virtually everything, or basically everything virtually. One file, one thing that you have now on your PC somewhere, let's say I come to a conference and I don't have my HP71, and what's in that file? I got no way. I can't open a zip file. I can't do a directory listing. This is a Windows-based IL controller that lets me open that media and look at it. So I can do a directory listing or whatever. You can't manipulate the files, but it lets me do it. This was created by JF as an example of how to implement a controller. And again, the source code for all the stuff's available, and they're very helpful if you're interested. It's probably only one in a few that are going to do this kind of stuff, but he did it as an example of how to implement a controller and how to issue controls, not just respond. Another example, I'm sorry, I just said the wrong thing. This is for the media viewing. This is the actual controller. I'm mixing them up. This lets you give arbitrary commands. So on his webpage, he explains this, where you connect up a bunch of devices, and this is a command line. You can just give commands where you can, he walks you through a sequence where he turns an HP71B on. The 71 in the loop is acting as a device, where he turns it on and turns it off and makes it say hi. And then you tell a DAC to collect some data and send it off to printers. So you can use this as, you're going to need, I say moderate plus, maybe more. You need to understand HPIL because it's an HPIL command line, not a DOS command line or a 71 command line.
4 minutes to move.
Okay.
Quick question.
Yep.
On the previous slide for the ILP Live,
Yep.
do you mean connect 9114?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Because you got 9914.
Oh. That was put in to see who was paying attention.
14D.
There's another typo again. Let's see who else can, and it's still coming. So what can I do? Some examples. How do I add, what does this stuff come down to? What does it really look like? Here's a hypothetical scenario. Before yesterday, my charts had a different hypothetical scenario. Suppose you arrive at a conference and you find that your machine says memory lost. So this obviously happened. So what do? Well, I connect the Pillbox to the USB port. You guys have seen what it is. It's just got a USB cable. I then start up the IL per client, and I select this file, which is my initials, which just has all my current 71 content stuff in it. Click start. So I'm going to go to those controls at the top of ILPER and say, this is the file, start doing it. And then on the 71, and it's different platform by platform, the 71, I give this command which configures the loop and assigns addresses. And so everything now is addressable. And then I just go about my commands. I'm going to copy this file into my RAM, and then I'm going to use this to copy the JPC ROM to this RAM, and then I'm going to copy all the other files out of the other files. And within about, I think, 6 minutes, I timed it from memory loss to everything's back the way it was, rather than what would have been a heart attack if I didn't have this. So that's a good example of the basic, simple use of it. This is a more interesting one. Here's a scenario. I have a physical math ROM from HP71, but I want to load it into EMU71, which is Christoph's emulator, which is an amazing thing if you haven't checked it out. So how do I copy a ROM with a printer? That doesn't sound like something I would normally, that wouldn't be my tool of choice, right? Well, it turns out it's actually very simple using some of the tools. The first thing I do is I have a simple program. I'll show you on the next page. I just print the entire ROM to the buffer. So I just get some bytes, print them, get some bytes, print them, the whole ROM. Then I copy and paste that to a text file called that. This tool exists using this format that's been out there, which converts the format of the ROM into the format that the machine needs. So the output of this, because it's coming from a printer, are ASCII bytes, right? It's ASCII text, hex bytes. This converts it to the binary format. This program verifies that the checksum is fine, that I wasn't just being a cowboy grabbing the wrong stuff. And then I end up with this file, which I can now load into EM71. This is a binary image of the ROM created from the hex dump that I did this way. So this whole process takes about 5 minutes, and I've now copied a ROM into a format that can be used that way. Yeah?
That's using a print. You're using an actual printer? Or
No, the virtual printer in the ILPER. The point. So I'm just making the point. The point of the advantage of the virtual printer is you can easily print stuff, but instead of doing file I/O, create file blah 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 blah, assign the channel number, read and write, and this and that. This is just actually this will make it here. Here's the program. This is the program. I just get the address of the first file, and this is just to go to the beginning of the ROM, right? And then I just loop through the 16K of the ROM, and I go grab 64 nibbles or 32 bytes, and then here it is. This is my print statement. Basically, output 3 is just. Sorry?
Nothing. We were just wafting in the nostalgia. This is stuff we did 30 years ago.
And doing it again.
Look, he's got a peak.
That's right. And this is basically, so what this is just saying is loop with the ROM, go get the bytes, and then print them. But of course, the output's going to this window, which is capturing it, which I can then, instead of taking this printed paper or whatever. This is a pretty trivial program to do that. I just thought it was a very cool example of the advantage of virtual over other. Some resources. JF's website is here. His website is full of stuff that's interesting probably to most everyone here, all the pages. This brings you to the HPIL page that has the Pillbox and the ILPER stuff. Christoph's site, again, this goes to the HPIL stuff. And this stuff has been updated 3 or 4 times since I started in the spring. So it's very active, it's very current. And I talked to them first to make sure that they were cool with me talking about all this stuff and giving them credit and all that. They're interested in feedback. So if any of you guys are going to go do some of this stuff, go to the forum and talk about it, because how much time they spend, Christoph was very simple. He said, how much time I spend on which thing is based on how much people are talking about what they want. Yeah.
Well, 1st of November, there will be the famous outdoor meeting in Bale, Switzerland. And Christoph and Jean-François,
they're both going to be there.
Will be there. And if you want to meet them, just join us there.
I want very much to go to that meeting, but not the travel budget.
Short
I think
trip to Europe, so it's a problem.
But it's November. Why don't they do it in the summer? That should be a time to travel.
Yeah, I'd rather go there. Yeah. Let's see. Okay. The other place, and as I was alluding to, well, I think everyone here is familiar with the forum, Museum Forum. But the point is, if you're into this stuff and you're curious about it, and you're active in it, just go and put stuff there, because that's where they look for feedback that this is stuff we're doing, this is stuff we have. So some credits. Huge thanks to these two gentlemen for what they've done. Enormously generous with their time, and I call them accomplished politicians because, as Joe and a couple other people can attest, I have a voracious appetite with questions and questions and questions. And so after I started doing this stuff, I would send them questions, and Jeff had the best answer. He said, Bob, replies to this question would benefit everyone. Translation is, please use the forum, not my email address. Of course he's right, but of course he's right. People I'd like to thank, Joe, for some inspiration and patience again in getting through some of this stuff, and motivating by saying, you know, we've all been there with, wouldn't it be cool if we could do this? And that's led to some of this exploration. Dave Fredrickson is another person, and Sylvain Cote are people that have supplied some of the stuff we're going to talk about a little bit later. And these are vendors on eBay that I talk about. I'm not shilling for them or anything, but they're all good guys that are calculator guys, not just dealers, that will help you find stuff, you know, talk to them, hey, I want this, can you find that? They've all been totally reasonable with pricing. If anything, and they hate me saying this, if anything, they might sell it to you for less than it might go in the store. They're all good guys. This is Alan Thompson. This is Adam Jones. Who's on the forum is AJ something or other. And this is Scott Scott Reynolds, who donated that 41 to this conference. These are all calculator guys, though they're in business. Actually, this is a full-time job. These guys, it's sort of a side thing. But they're all good guys, good resources. If you contact them and say, I want 71 memory modules, they're going to say, Bob sent you. In closing, some people did jump in with other things. Have people done stuff with HPIL that we didn't cover that you'd want to throw out of, hey, I've also done something? I'm out of time, so we'll get you tomorrow.
Built an Apple II HPIL interface.
Any questions? Sorry?
Built an Apple II HPIL interface many years ago.
Questions? This stuff isn't that interesting to see, and I don't want to get into equipment changes and all that. But we can do that on the side, or is there any interest to look at it tomorrow online? You want to see it? I mean, we got time, so we can set that up when we don't have all the logistics. What I talked about was tools. Mostly what people talk about here is these are the solutions. I thought it was interesting to talk about these are the tools with which one can do things. And I did a couple of simple things. But some more interesting things have been done with the tools. And that's my transition to my next speaker, or your next speaker.
After lunch.
Okay. Well, the next speaker will pick up with...
Okay, we want to